Hello and welcome to the ITM web panel discussion on Why Ireland. And we've a great panel for you to listen to today and to have a conversation with. And we'll start with Cathal Beale, who's the CEO of the Irish National Stud. We've Fran Berry, ex-flat jockey turned broadcaster extraordinaire. And Tony Lacy, based in the US now, who's a Bloodstock agent. So a nice covering all the bases for this conversation. And Cathal, we'll start off, the topic of this web panel is Why Ireland. And one of the conversation that we have is why do horses and horse racing have such an importance here in Ireland? How has this come about that Ireland has become so important for racing?
I think the horse is inherent in our culture. It's in our DNA. Like going back hundreds of years, we had legends of Cuchulainn and legends of Fionn McCool, and always horses were very much involved in the very center of those. But if you go back even 150 years, the horse was always the animal that was fed before the children or before the husband. The horse was what was always fed in Irish houses up and down the land as the most special animal within the place, and really the vehicle and the driver of the economies before canals or before road transport or before anything came on board like that. So the horse has always had a very special place in families and in rural Ireland. Obviously we invented steeplechasing here many moons ago as well, and we're a little bit cracked, which helps when it comes to riding horses. So I think we've got all the ingredients for horses to be part of the culture and the fabric. And then obviously, as time has gone on, racehorses in particular has become intrinsic with Ireland with, back in the early 1900s, the creation of the National Stud, the creation of the Aga Khan Stud, the creation of the Ballylynch Stud, and those great farms that have established themselves in that period, all the way through then into the 30s and 40s, with the Racing Board, with the Irish National Stud Act, and HRI being developed. So we've had a structure to go with the historical aspect of why horses are part of our culture and our DNA. So we've sort of done a very good job, I think, in embedding all those things together to get to the point where we are today.
Well, Fran, Cathal mentions about the jockeys and us all being a little bit cracked, and you know that the Irish jockeys have such a reputation all over the world, and that's helped to kind of emphasize our position in the horse racing industry worldwide.
Yeah, indeed it does, Sally-Ann. I suppose most Irish jockeys before they become jockeys are horsemen, and they start off with ponies and work their way up. And Tony will tell you, they can travel to America. I've ridden with expats all around the world, and the standard, if you can make it in Ireland or get a good grounding riding in Ireland, you can go anywhere basically, and that's where it's ended up. And I suppose going back to what Cathal was saying, only recently we did a program about Dawn Run over the Christmas. I made one 34 or 5 years ago, and it was the talk of Twitter and whatever for a week, so that's how ingrained horse racing is in the psyche over here.
And Tony, just coming to you, Fran's mentioning, the Irish jockeys flying the flag around the world. For you as an Irishman living in America and making your career there, how is it for you? How do you think that the Irish are perceived when we go abroad?
Well, honestly, to be Irish is almost interlinked with being a good horse person and being a natural horse person. I think Ireland is a well, we could perceive and is in many cases a rural society. And being a rural society, you have an affinity with animals, you have an understanding of animals. So from a young age, a lot of people grow up with either if not working around them, they have an affinity for animals. And I think that's very innate in the Irish culture. And when you travel abroad, I think the Irish person is always looked upon as somebody who's got a talent. It's an ingrained sort of natural instinct. And to be quite honest, I think the Irish have always been they've always been kind to a horse. They've always been, but they've always had an ambition to be good. They want to be a jockey. They wanted to be involved in horses. And I think that drive from a young age is like a national sport. And I think like whether it's a GAA, playing for your county, your club, anybody who's around horses wants to be a jockey or wants to be a trainer, wants to be involved.
And Cathal, we've mentioned a bit about the history of racing in Ireland and that, and it's very well known that we have great land for raising horses. Do you think that's why so many breeders choose to send their mares here to Ireland to have their foals raised on this land? And why is it so good for horses?
There's no doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt that the quality of land is something that's particularly special about the country. You know, we've got rich limestone land, we've got a great climate, we've got an agricultural society and a rural society. So we have all the natural amenities. I always say, you know, we've no gas or we've no oil or we've no coal, but we have land. And that's our natural resource in this country, you know, and a bit of rain always helps as well, even though we give out about it for most of the time. But the quality of the land and the quality of the climate here is what develops the bone in horses and develops soundness in horses. And, you know, the old adage, what would you require in your horse? Soundness, soundness, soundness. And I think Irish horses are known for being sound the world over because of the quality of the land predominantly.
And do you find that when you get breeders sending mares to the Irish National Stud, why do they pick Ireland to send their mares here?
Yeah, I think it's that quality of land, and it's the quality of people who are looking after them, as Tony and Fran have alluded to. Irish people in general are horse people. They're good to the animals, and the animals come to studs in Ireland and they leave looking better than they even came. You know, they come and they develop. The foals are getting a great head start by being on the best quality land in the world. So I think it's that. Plus, it's the welcome that they get. It's the structure. It's the quality of our stallions. It's the quality of all of those factors that go into why people want to come and breed their stock in Ireland, I think.
And Fran, talking about, you know, the land and the facilities and what we have here in Ireland, our training facilities are also world class, and you know what we have on the Curragh in particular is known throughout the world for how good it is.
Indeed it is, and I suppose in the last 18 months the investment that's gone into the Curragh has just been unbelievable. There's been about 2 or 3 million spent on upgrading the gallops, and you know, the old Vic gallop is probably the best all-weather gallop I've ever ridden on in the world. If you want to find out where you're going with a horse, you bring them there, the grass gallops, and it attracts trainers from all the country. Being a relatively small island, 2 hours from anywhere gets you to the Curragh, and you can see why it's very popular with trainers both down the country and locally. We could do with a few more trainers perhaps in the Curragh. That's the only thing it's lacking, but facility wise it's there. And the ability to actually gallop horses on the race course in Ireland, you don't get to do that everywhere else. That's a big plus post racing or on a gallops morning. And
you know that it's a private training facility, but I know that anytime anybody comes to Ireland, a trip to Ballydoyle is like #1 on any racing fan's bucket list. If they can ever manage to getting in the gates of Coolmore is a little bit easier, but getting in the gates of Ballydoyle is something everybody dreams of.
Yeah, indeed. I was lucky enough to ride down there a few times, and I was down there last year actually for a gallops morning or a pre-Ebor thing, and it's just like wonderland for horses, isn't it? You know, the facilities are there, the results are there, the horse flesh is there, and you know, it lacks for nothing. And I suppose it's a benchmark compared to anywhere around the world.
And Tony, our race courses are also top class. You know, we mightn't have the massive size of tracks as other countries have and as you have in the US, but each track has its own idiosyncrasies, and each one is known for being a true test for horses.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I think that's what's brilliant about it. You know, if you've got a horse in New York, you're going to be running at Belmont, Aqueduct, Saratoga. You know where you're going to run. It's go left-handed. It's just a slight variance in the surfaces, the track layout. But other than that, that's it. It's a very quantifiable. I think for gamblers, it's sort of it eliminates sort of a lot of equations. When you come to Ireland, I mean, it is whether you're in Tramore, you know, Ballinrobe, whatever, the Curragh, there's no hiding places. You know, a lot of people say you can drop down in class and do this. There is no dropping down in class in Ireland. And that is something that I think is, until you're in the middle of it and, you know, until you get out and actually look back in, you realize the quality, absolutely, the depth is just amazing. Well, I remember John Ox won a maiden in Wexford on the flat, obviously, but it was before it changed. And I think soon afterwards, that horse won on Arc Weekend. You know, it's, you know, Belmont, you know, you get, or the Belmont Stakes were by Go and Go, who won at Galway. And that's just, I know it's historical, but recently, you know, there's been nonstop. It's just repeatedly, there's repeated examples of horses that have absolutely battled at the very, very top. And I think in Ireland, when you're there, you take it a little bit for granted. You might be there in Gorin on a wet Thursday afternoon and not really appreciate the quality that is actually there. And I think when you're at I'm lucky enough to go to the Breeders' Cup fairly often. And again, when it's here at Keeneland, or Churchill, it's easier, but you see in the mornings when the Ballydoyle horses come out, as you mentioned, everybody pauses because the quality of horse flesh, the military precision, but you don't see that anywhere else. And I think that's something that, makes you a little bit of quite pride when you see it coming out, because you realize a small country of about 5-6 million people has created the empires that it has. And I'm not just using Ballydoyle. You could go to a lot of stable yards around the country and see very similar operations.
Tony mentions wet afternoons at Gorin, and Fran, you've had more than your fair share of them. And not only did you put yourself through that hardship as a jockey, but now you decide to stand out in the cold for a living as a broadcaster too. But you can tell us firsthand about how top class our race courses are, but how tough they are, and why do they produce such good horses from them?
Well, I suppose, like Tony said, first of all, it's the variety of tracks and the idiosyncrasies, if you like. You have very sharp tracks down the country, obviously to Curra and Leopardstown and everything in between, hills and whatnot. And it's just a strength and depth of racing that there's nowhere to hide. But equally with them sharp, undulating tracks, horses get a really good education. They can learn more in one run, and then less than conventional tracks, if you like, than they would maybe up to Curra and Leopardstown. We'd recently, Bellewstown in July, the Fillies Mile Group 1 winner, Pretty Gorgeous, made her debut there, and Bellewstown would be one of the weakest tracks. You think, going there, I'll aim one of my weaker fillies for this maiden, and you pitch up. There's Pretty Gorgeous, who won the Fillies Mile. There's Siskin's half sisters in the race, Talacre, and I think the first 5 all won races out of that race. But that's just to illustrate the strength and depth. Alamshire, Irish Derby winner, won in Listowel. 2 Epsom Derby winners, won in Killarney in recent years. And in the Kerry tracks, it's just the strength and depth, and there's no hiding place here. If you've got a horse that can compete here at any level on any track, they're going to hold their own worldwide.
And that's just it, Cathal. The horses that we have, they have to fight hard to win a maiden in Ireland, because we may be small, but we have a good top quality level of racing. But Irish horses in recent years just have gone from strength to strength, and it must be a source of pride at the Irish National Stud for the amount of success we've had recently.
Oh, it's fantastic. When we get, like, in a normal year, we get 40,000 people come through the gates. And one of the things you love telling them is the success stories of Irish horses, not just in Ireland, but worldwide. Just before coming on, I had a look at a few things. The world rankings, the top 10 racehorses in the world from last year, 4 of them are Irish breds. And I looked at the top 36, and 12 of the top 36 have an IRE suffix. It's quite amazing when you consider, as Tony says, it's an island of 6 million people. To produce a third of the best racehorses in the world is quite something, Another thing that did strike me as well, I was just looking back at Epsom Derbies of past. The first Irish horse to win the Epsom Derby was Orby, 1907. So it took us 127 years to win the Epsom Derby. It took us another 50 years before Hard Ridden. Since 2000, Irish trained horses have won 12 of the Epsom Derbies. So what that really shows you is just the trajectory of Irish racing, and it continues to develop and continues to get stronger. And as the lads have said, you go try and win a maiden in, with any disrespect to Roscommon or Ballinrobe or Bellewstown or whatever, you'd want an 80 rated horse to go and win a maiden, any maiden in the country. And it shows when they get exported then to America or to different parts of the world, that if a horse can lie up in a maiden in Ireland, it's competitive anywhere in the world. So it's not just at the highest level, it's at every level where it's extremely competitive, and it's all for the good.
And Tony, for you as an Irishman based in the States, it must be a source of pride for you to see the success, not only in America, but all over the world, of the Irish horses.
It is, and again, it goes back to I think we've got a sort of a very good natural selection, where, because if you can't compete in Ireland, you can't breed a moderate horse. There is no market for it. There's no use for it. So there is always a pressure to breed a better horse, because that's the only thing that can compete. So because of that, as Fran and Cathal were saying, you know, you find a horse that was placed in the maiden. It's competitive in most countries around the world, even at a stakes level. So there's, I think, you know, there is a good, but I think it is a natural selection. The competitiveness of our domestic racing scene, the commercial aspect of it, that you really don't have a market for something that is mediocre. And I think then people have to step up. They have to go to a better stallion, invest in better mares. And because of that, you know, it doesn't reward somebody who is breeding a moderate horse. And I think that's important, because a lot of other jurisdictions, I think you can get away with that to some degree. You can survive. In Ireland, you can't.
And Fran, talking about that, about the success, last year was obviously a difficult year for many in racing, and it was a disturbed year of the racing calendar, but Irish horses still had unbelievable success, and we seem to have success with everything. We seem to be able to go from, you know, Group 1 level sprinters to Grand National winners and everything in between. Why do you think that we managed to produce horses at all those different levels?
It's a bit like what Tony was saying there. I suppose it's the breeding, first of all, it's the raw materials to go into, then the skill of the horsemen, and then that competitive nature of the racing. If as Tony said, if you can survive in Ireland and win and hold your own in our stakes company, you're definitely going to hold that on a par elsewhere, if not upgraded. And look, one of the big success stories last year was Miss Amulet. She was a very cheaply bought filly. She won a maiden on her third start in Cork, won in Naas, and then went and won the Lauder in York, and just beaten a Group 1. And you know, it can be done, but you definitely need the ability. But if you can hold your own Ireland, you can bring them anywhere, I find, at least in the form. We've seen in the Breeders' Cup, we've seen in Hong Kong with Mogul recently. It's a product that, and of course Australia, it's a product that just transfers itself very, very well anywhere you want to go.
And on the national hunt side of things, we completely dominate. You go to Cheltenham every year, and they say it's the Irish against the English, but really it's the Irish against the French when it comes to the breeding side of it, and it's the Irish against the British when it comes to the training. But we dominate both nations on so many levels.
Yeah, indeed we do. And the jumping is, it's amazing how it's turned around in 20 years that you see the likes of Cheveley Park now have all their jumpers in Ireland. And, you know, that would have been unheard of 10 years ago. But the standard that Gordon Elliott and Willie Mullins have brought the whole game up to is fascinating to watch. And, you know, there was an article this week, God forbid it didn't happen, that Irish horse couldn't go to Cheltenham in March. How thin the ranks would be in them championship races. You know, it just illustrates the strength and depth and the volume of top class horses here at the minute, and the horsemen to bring them to that level, I suppose.
Yeah, anybody I've spoken to who's talked about Irish not being let go to Cheltenham has said it wouldn't be Cheltenham without the Irish. It would be very very kind of one-sided indeed. But Cathal, talking about the national hunt success and the flat success, you have the museum, obviously the Irish National Stud. You haven't been able to have as many tourists recently as you normally would have, but you also have the living legends, and that must be a source of pride as well, to show what the Irish horses have achieved over the past years.
Oh, it's fantastic. You know, for us to have Hurricane Fly, Kicking King, Hardy Eustace, Beef or Salmon, you know, these are horses that people come from all over Ireland to come and pet, and to be able to get up close and personal to them. And they remember back in Beef or Salmon the day he beat Best Mate, or they remember back in Kicking King to win the Gold Cup, or, you know, they remember Hurricane Fly at Leopardstown where he was a moral certainty every time he turned up. You know, they're just fantastic horses, and they're great to be around. And Hardy Eustace, you know, he's such a gentleman in his retirement, and he was such a tough, hardy horse. Like, we can all remember the Archibald, Brave Inca, Hardy Eustace, you know, Cheltenham champion hurdle that year, where it looked like Hardy Eustace was beaten all ends up, but Conor O'Dwyer just kept finding, and Hardy kept finding, and they somehow repelled Archibald and Paul Carberry sitting up, and Brave Inca. You know, it was just one of those races, and it's great to relive those races with people, and to kind of bring them out into the field and let them feed these guys a carrot and let them get up close and personal to actually, you know, legends of the game. It's a fantastic thing for tourists, especially people who aren't involved, or people who don't really know an awful lot about racing, to be able to, you know, come and visit a stud farm. And that's the great thing about the ITM Stallion Trail in a normal year, and obviously online now, is that we can allow people in and actually see what it is we're doing. And you know, to see what goes into producing these horses and what goes into creating these athletes, and then to show them what a kind of a life they can have afterwards as well. It's to show them the full circle is special.
And that's something that I've always felt is very special about us having the Irish National Stud to showcase that, and the museum that I mentioned as well. It really showcases the history of Irish racing, and it's nice to have a place that you can take people in and show them that side of what's gone on in the past and how far Irish racing and breeding has come. Yeah,
like our new centre is due to open in the spring, and obviously it'll be dependent on COVID, but it's the most exciting thing I think we've done in a long time. It allows people to come in a modern way and actually engage with the process from the beginning. So they essentially are given a tablet, and they are allowed to buy their yearling at Goffs. They then have to decide how to train it. They have to decide who's going to train it, what methods they're going to use. They get to name it, they get to pick the colors, and they get to learn everything about the industry and the physiology of the horse along the journey. And eventually they get to ride it. So they get to be Fran Berry for 20 minutes, and they get to actually, you know, ride out the horse, and the decisions they've made along the journey dictate where they finish. So it's incredibly exciting. And then they get to come out, watch the race back, have a bit of fun with their friends. And, you know, the last bit is the aftercare and the National Stud course, and some of the, you know, thousands of graduates of our program that have gone on to the four corners of the globe, and, you know, are advocates not just for the National Stud, but for Ireland in general, whether they were Irish or not. You know, they're in every corner of the globe, and it's something we're extremely proud of here. I know it's everybody's dream to be Fran Berry for at least 20 minutes of their life. It costs a whole lot less to have a horse in the way you're talking about it than if you'd actually have to pay for it, though. Yeah.
I wouldn't do the wait after Christmas, to be honest.
I won't say what I said to you the other day, Fran, about you turning 40. But we're talking about Cathal's broken the taboo and mentioned the dreaded COVID word. Eventually, we managed to get about 25 minutes in before we mentioned COVID. But obviously, these are uncertain times at the moment. That's why the Irish Stallions Showcase has gone online. We can't go and look at the horses in person. But Tony, what do you see for the future of racing now that we're at a crossroads at the moment? There's lots of things have had to change in the past year, but what do you think that we could see for the future of Irish racing and breeding?
Well, you know, I think COVID it's been a sort of a disaster for a lot of things, but I think what it's done, it has actually brought innovation. I think under everything there is any level of stress or any situation of trauma, we learn to adapt. And I think Ireland has learned to adapt far better, and probably better than most. Then I think I compliment everybody over there that's sort of risen to the occasion. You know, I think the one thing, Ireland and the horse has got an incredible brand, the brand Ireland. And I think that's something that Ireland needs to keep be very aware of, because as I talking about the Irish National Stud, that's an absolute treasure. I think we need to keep education, as Cathal was explaining, educating the broader public, because as we move from a rural to an urban society, and that's as I think that's the problem for our industry in general, is because we have incrementally less affinity with the horse as society gets more urban. And I think it is important for Ireland to keep in touch with our roots, keep those things alive. I think National Hunt Racing, as you're saying, that is the grassroots of racing in Ireland. And I think the flat racing it has its own dynamic because it's more international. National Hunt Racing is more of what I would call almost like a domestic or a very regional, because it is a Western Europe phenomenon, and especially Irish. So we need to concentrate on that. That's something that the public can latch onto. They'll know these horses for a number of years. They appreciate them. They're idols in their eyes. And that's where young people can affiniate. When it's racing over Christmas, that's where everybody loves to go racing, something to do. And I think keeping that entertainment factor very, very real don't lose lose sight of the fact that we're entertaining the public. We're entertaining. We're not just an industry, but we're entertainment, and we need to sort of expand on that on every aspect. You know, the betting, the commerce, everything comes after that. It's a byproduct of what we're doing, and I think if we keep the racing healthy, alive, and just understand that we're in a sport. It's a vital sport to an industry, but it is a sport, and I think from that, I think we can develop a healthy and prosperous future. I
hope so. And I'm sure Fran is there currently trying to patent his Be Fran Berry video game that he's creating in the future. But Fran, where you've worked the entire way through COVID and lockdown, you've been on our race courses, but where do you see Irish racing heading at the moment? Where would you see us being in 20 years' time?
Yeah, well, look, I agree with everything that Tony said, and I do think it needs to be made as accessible as possible to the general public. I think that's to get the next generation in, whether it's through the Irish National Stud. I think when race goers return to the race courses, I hope there's plenty of new initiatives there just to get people in the door and get them in the habit of going racing. And from a business perspective, I'd love to see more foreign owners, rather than buy the horses when they won a maiden or whatever in Ireland, come in and buy them and put them into training maybe as yearlings, 2-year-olds, and take them away then if they're good enough to go abroad, that kind of thing. And I've seen a number of trainers go from maybe being middle of the road jumps trainers to going to buy yearlings and trade and make a business model like that. And I think that's the way forward for a lot of people to adjust and survive under new market conditions.
And Cathal, the same question to you, that, you know, we're at a crossroads at the moment. Everything's kind of up in the air, but the breeding industry is still going strong. And where do you see it being in 2040? Hopefully not still in lockdown.
No, I think we'll be out of lockdown by then. Yeah, I think the key is exactly as Tony said. It's to make sure that we're creating new fans and establishing new people coming into it as we become more urbanized in Ireland, and obviously throughout the Western world. It's getting more urban, and the connection to the land is something that we just need to really concentrate on. And it's obviously part of what we're doing. But as Fran said, it's the race courses, it's the breeders, it's the ITM, it's everyone has that responsibility to make sure that we keep the doors open and make sure this thing is accessible as possible. Because the one thing we know, if we can put a horse in front of somebody, something special happens. If we can get them there, something special happens. We always say that here. If we can get somebody to visit this place, they can't leave but being impressed. It's getting them there in the first place. And it's the same with a race course. It's the same with any place where you have a horse in front of people. You know, the old Winston Churchill, there's something about the outside of a horse that does something good for the inside of a man. You know, it's very true. And it always amazes me how much we take that for granted as horse people. You know, we're used to being around them all day long. Whereas when you see, you know, we're lucky here that we see a lot of people who come in who might never have seen a horse in their entire lives. And it's amazing just to stand back and watch what happens, you know, how they interact with them, how the smiles that can be attributed to children and people of all ages. You know, it's getting horses in front of people, making horses the star of the show, and making it more accessible through various different ways. Obviously, you know, we do it through tourism, but we also try to do it with racing clubs and getting people with really small amounts of equity or of leasing, you know, having to spend very little money to come in and actually experience what's happening on the racing side. You know, we do the same on the Bloodstock side with mare syndication, where they can come in and take a portion of a portfolio of mares, you know, to kind of reduce the risks, but make sure that everything is done right and above board, and that they have a really good experience. And hopefully they become the next generation of, if not breeders, bloodstock purchasers and traders. So it's all about getting people in and giving them a good experience, I think. And however many gateways they are to that, obviously we like to think we're at the center of that, but there's any amount of ways of getting people involved through race courses and through many other different things. Like your own Thoroughbred Tales is a fantastic way of doing that.
Thank you, Cathal. That's a nice plug for Thoroughbred Tales that anybody who's watching can check out on Twitter, where we try to do just what Cathal said, to try to show what's going on behind the scenes in racing, where people can follow different hosts every week from the industry. But the three of you have sold me. I am now convinced I am a fan of Irish racing and breeding. You've talked me into it. But thank you, all three of you, for your time, to Cathal, Fran and Tony. It's been a very interesting discussion. If you want to find out more, you can check out the ITM website, itm.ie/Irish Stallion Showcase, where there's lots more content from the Irish Stallion Showcase, as well as on YouTube and their social media. Thank you all.